This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as Manny just said, I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Boy, you know, the last several podcasts we did, we talked all about hunting opportunities across the state of Montana. I want to thank all of you for the great emails and all that on that. I'm glad that so many of you enjoyed those podcasts, and I'm sure some of you still have questions about that. And of course, if you just look in your podcast description, whether we were talking about Region 1 or all the way through Region 7, down below that podcast description, you can just click on the link for the wildlife manager I was talking to, and that'll open up your email, and you can send them an email right there and get any questions you have answered. You can do the same with me, too. And then just last week, we talked with Heath Headley all about the salmon egg collection effort and how all that went. Then we got deep into just the whole science of king salmon and that, which was great. I want to thank Heath again for all the time he spent with me on that. So next up, I got to thinking, I wonder if people really continue to fish that much this time of year. And of course, I ran across a guy that we know fishes a lot, because when we do the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, you go to montanooutdoor.com, and Don Wilkins is always giving us a great report. And by golly, he's still been fishing out there and doing quite good. So I want to talk a bit about fall fishing, how that goes, if you want to still do it. We are a ways before that giant body of water over on Fort Peck Reservoir ice is over, so how would you go about doing that? What's some of his advice? He is also a great guide. And then we're going to get into talking about preparing for ice fishing so that we get you off to a great start this year and have some fun doing ice fishing. So I think we're going to have a pretty good long season. So I want to bring Don Wilkins in. Hey, Don, thanks a lot for coming back on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. You must be a glutton for punishment. You showed up again, huh?
No, you guys are always fair to me, so I keep coming back.
Well, Don, let's start with fall fishing. Now, you have been out quite a bit. Have you seen very many other fishermen out on Fort Peck this time of year?
Over the past 2 weeks, not very many. Most people I see are out trying to target lake trout, which are up shallower, spawning now, so they're a little more accessible, pulling crankbaits and working them over with some jigs, with some vertical presentations. And occasionally I'll see a boat or two down in some areas where we've been pike fishing and smallmouth fishing. But for the most part, honestly, the biggest congregation of people I see are out looking for lakers right now. And you get back in some of the creeks and stuff like that, and you go 2-3 days and I don't see anybody back there. So there's some people around, but you're making your own fishing report pretty much at this point in time.
Yeah. So as far as a guide, are you booking trips? Are people booking trips with you to get out there this time of year? They are.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Yeah, we were supposed to have one today, but the wind kind of shut us down. We were out last Saturday, and looks like maybe I'll be back out again this coming Friday and Saturday, weather dependent. But a lot of people everybody's out ice fishing and doing things anymore throughout the winter, and some of the clothing that you can get anymore. A day on the boat when it's 40 degrees would seem like a warm day out ice fishing. So as long as you wear, the gear that you need to stay warm, heck, it's just as comfortable out there in open water as it is ice fishing. So people out there a lot later than they used to be, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and Fort Peck Reservoir is just such an incredible fishery. It just always seems to deliver if you're open to, switching up and going after different species, and there's a lot in there. So let's say, over the last 30 days, what have you been targeting and how have you been doing, Don?
For the most part, we have been looking at lake trout, northern pike, and smallmouth bass has been the majority of what we've been fishing for.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, we'll go look around for some walleye a little bit, but mostly it's been those three. And, the pike fishing, we've been mainly casting spoons over some of the shallow weed beds. Smallmouth bass fishing has been with some plastics, and the majority of the fish, slip bobbers and minnows. And then for the lake trout, we've just been finding the shallow points where they're kind of staging up, getting ready to spawn, and working those over with the live scope and just vertical jigging for those things. So that's pretty much just been what we've been doing for, I'd say, probably at least the last good month. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would you say has been the most productive for you as far as catching goes?
Well, just being honest, the last 6 weeks or so, just about everything,
Really?
they've been really good. I suppose if anything is kind of tapering off a little bit, it might be the smallmouth. They seem to be sliding out a little bit deeper and scattering out a little bit. But, I got to tell you, it's been really good. We've had a lot of really good days. So, I suppose the mainstay right now would be northern pike and lake trout. If you're looking for either one of those, the fishing for them right now at this moment is really good.
Okay. Well, let's go through start with northern pike. How are you fishing for those, say, over the last 30 days? And, if you continue to go out, what would be your strategy as far as, where you would want to go to target those, and then, what your presentation is, all that?
Sure. We are mainly just looking back in some of the creek arms, and all we're looking for is the weed beds that come up within a foot or two of the surface. And some of them, the weed tops are right on the surface. 9 feet to 10 feet of water, seems to be the best where you find the weeds that are coming up that high. And we're just working them with, some 5/8 ounce spoons and some 5/8 ounce spinners, Blue Fox spinners. And, just kind of a mid retrieve where that spoon or that spinner will run a foot or two under the surface and coming over the tops of those weeds. And the northerns are usually either on the side towards the shore, or they're going to be just on the side towards the bank. And, we've caught several of them right when the lure is about to come out of the water next to the boat. They finally must be the change of that angle of that lure, and they just hit it right next to the boat. So that's all we've been doing for the past 30 days is those two presentations mainly.
Now, are you going up the big dry arm, or where's the best to target those guys?
We've been west and we've been down the dry arm. All you need to do is just find any of these back bays pretty much right now have the weed beds in them. Third and fourth, between fourth and fifth, anywhere down there, down past B marker, we have found them. And you can usually find them. They'll be kind of a brownish maroon, kind of different color to the water you'll see when you're cruising along there. And you can also use your side imaging on your boat if you have that, and really picks up the weed beds really good. And, we just try to stay just off the edges of them, and just about any back bay, just go cruise through there until you find them. And pretty much all you got to do is find the weeds, and those pike are there right now.
And any trouble with the weeds as far as, keeping those off your presentation and that? Or is there any technique you're using for that, or just good old pull it on through and wait for them to hit?
Well, you're going to get some weeds on whatever you're using, as long as you're kind of watching and where you see the weeds come up to the surface. You don't want to cast right on the backside of that. But with the spoons and the speed of your retrieve, you just, once you make a few casts in through some of that stuff, you get an idea of how quick you need to reel to keep your spoon off there. And one thing about the pike, you don't have to be down in the water column. You know, you can be 8, 9, 10 feet of water, and even if that spoon is a foot under the surface, they'll see it. They'll still come up and get it. We were fishing down towards the pines this past weekend, and you could see the bottom out there in about 6, 7 feet. So if we can see that good, those pike fish can definitely see better than that. So
yeah. What kind of sizes are you averaging for pike?
You know, we try to keep, you know, anything that's probably 28 inches and up is what we consider, you know, a good one to flay, and we'll throw smaller ones back. But, you know, to catch a limit of those 28 to say mid 30-inch fish right now, you know, if you want to just spend a day targeting pike, you could get 10 of them, you know, fairly easy, just covering a few spots, you know, and just fish a spot and jump around to the next one. So that's probably average size, I would say. And we've caught a few bigger ones actually. Funny enough, out jigging for lake trout is where we've caught some of the bigger ones, but still some really nice fish back in the weed beds right now for sure.
Yeah, you know, and the pike, I think they kind of get a bad name, you know, with some fishermen that view them as, oh, you know, those are just not a great fish to target. They're not great eating, and that is just really not true. I mean, pike is a good eating fish, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. It's great to eat. You know, you just have to take a little bit of time and cut that strip of Y bones out of there. And once you get the bones out of them, they're really excellent to eat. And, you know, you get a batch of 28 to 36-inch northerns, and you'd be surprised how much meat is on, you know, and you don't need that many of them to get a really big bag of fillets compared to some other fish out there. So excellent eating. And
for you listeners, I will definitely try to find a few different videos maybe that to link as far as instructions on how to get those Y bones and that out, because I think that also might be a bit of a deterrent for a lot of people is, gee, I just don't seem to know how to clean those right. I just end up with too many bones. So I'll try to post a link or two up there to give you guys some ideas on how to best clean those buggers. Now, let's move on to the lake trout. For the Lakers, where are you going after Lakers on Fort Peck this time of year, and what are you using there?
Well, a lot of the little points there's some off of Bear Creek, you know, around York Island, B Marker, you know, it's kind of the usual places, Hatchby Point.
Yeah.
You know, and we're running anywhere from 30 to 55 feet is where we're kind of trying to find the fish. And it seems like from my experience this time of the year, the fish that are on that deeper end and that 50 to 55 foot are easier to catch than the ones that are up shallower. So when I start looking out on some of them points, I usually start out in about 60 feet and just start working my way up shallow until I start finding, you know, some pretty good sized groups of them. And then we just spot lock on them with the trolling motor, and we're just fishing them with 3/4 ounce jig heads and 4.5-inch Kitech paddle tails. And that's pretty much all we've been using, to be honest with you. And it's been very well.
Do you find that this time of year the Lakers act differently as far as, you know, how to get them stimulated to take your lure, or is it just business as usual?
No, definitely. You have to have a lot of patience. You might get, 15 or more fish that want to come up and chase a jig and act like they're going to bite it, where you finally get one that hits it. And they seem to be just more in a mood that, you know, whatever you have down there is just kind of irritating them, and they just want it out of there, and they'll chase it. And we've had some the last couple of weeks where they hit the jig, and the clients are looking over the side of the boat and they watch the fish eat it. It's just like a foot under the surface. So definitely not just to drop it down and crank it away. It takes a lot of kind of messing around. And it seems like if you can fish 10 to 12 feet above those fish and wait for them to come up and make, you know, their own decision whether they're going to come up and want to eat it or not, you have a lot better success rather than just sit there and jigging and constantly jigging, you know, just let them move.
Well, when I talked to you, it's been quite a while back. I had posted a video of yours that you took using your your side. I think it was a side imaging video that you had, and you had one of your clients, and you were showing them, just kind of that exact same thing of, wait for it, and then start reeling. It was fascinating to see how you were using that technology to help teach somebody. That seems to be one of your fortes. Does any of that change much when we get into these fall fishing times, or does that even become more important as far as how to get them to trigger?
Yeah, I would say it's huge this time of year. I just had a group, a couple guys from Delaware that came up and they fished with me last year, and I didn't have the live scope. And this year I did, and the guy was amazed at how much easier it was to see what's going on, and then the attitude of those fish, whether they're really kind of charging off the bottom or they're just kind of lazily coming up and looking at it. And the thing about it is, if we're in 40, 50 feet of water and you pan that live scope transducer around and you see a group of fish 60 feet, you can cast that jig out 60 feet and watch that thing drop right down on top of them. And sometimes bringing that jig a little more horizontal across the bottom back to the boat catches fish where that straight up and down presentation, maybe it doesn't get them. So yeah, in the shallow water, it's been huge on catching some more fish, I believe.
Okay. Well, if you have any more of those videos, send them on to me, because people really love watching those and learning from it. Now, to me, the Lakers, they're kind of a interesting fish in that, they can get to be a pretty good size, but I hear often in, a lot of these chats and different things, we get on social media and that, and I've been hearing a lot of people saying, they're just not as big as they used to be in Fort Peck because they're getting fished too much. What do you think of that? Do you think that's the case?
It could be. I see a lot more traffic, it seems like, out there. People looking for them. The bag limit is pretty low. I think it's 3 apiece and then 6 in possession. As far as size goes, I guess I can't speak to, like years and years and years ago, but I guess my own experience with it over the past 5 or 6 years, it seems harder to find the fish in the places where you used to find them, but the size, I feel like the quality of the fish is still there, if that makes any sense. You just have to kind of get away from the obvious places, the names of the spots that you hear all the time, and put in some time out there, and just cover some other structure that you don't see people on all the time, and then I think that's kind of the key to being successful out there, is having lots of different places to go look.
And as far as, especially with that live scope, I think that gives you, the ability to get more selective and that sort of stuff. But also, you get an idea of what's obviously triggering them, because you can see whether they're checking out what you're offering in that. So when you find that, say, a particular jig that you're using is not working, I mean, how long do you keep trying something before you switch it out?
Not very long, especially if I'm in a bunch of fish. And we just went through that when we started kind of targeting these fish when they moved up shallow, and some of the colors of the jig heads we were using were not working. And I just started, I'd get 2 or 3 fish would chase and they wouldn't bite, and I'd take that jig off and switch it out and switch it out and switch it out. And now we have 3 colors that we've been using. They're mainly reds with a little bit of white in them, and those seem to be working really good, red and orange. And before that, it was some white and silver and green and things like that. But for some reason, maybe it's just that initial when they first see it, and it kind of triggers them more than some of those other colors. But one other thing too, I will say about the live scope is you see all those fish and it will make you kind of sometimes stay in an area where you should probably maybe move on. So if you're fishing an area and you've tried a bunch of different things and those fish aren't doing what you want them to do, sometimes it's best to move to the next spot and check them out and maybe come back to those fish, because
Yeah.
For what fishing is. Sometimes the fish are there, but they're not going to cooperate, and it doesn't matter what you do. So,
And it can kind of drive you nuts, can it? Because you're sitting there going, "Now, come on, I can see you. I know you're there." But it's if we knew the secrets to what all that does, we'd be fishing every tournament in the world. But you just don't. So how long do you give it usually when, let's say you see a good group of fish, but like you were saying, nothing seems to work? I mean, do you work it for a half hour, for an hour? But how long do you go before you say, "No, these guys just aren't cooperating. Let's move"?
Yeah, if there's a lot of fish, I'll probably give it an hour. And that kind of depends on how the day's been going too. If it's first thing in the morning and we roll up and there's a large group of fish, we may wait it out more than an hour. Sometimes you just move the boat around a couple boat lengths or something, and it's just in a different spot, and all of a sudden they bite. If it's been kind of like that for the day and you drop in on fish and they're not biting, and they drop in on the next group and they're not, then I'll probably go to a half hour before I move.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say probably an hour at the longest. And then as the day goes on, if it's continuing like that, 30 minutes. And then sometimes you just have to make a big move. If you're fishing the Haxby area and you've hit 2 or 3 points and they're not doing anything, just go somewhere else. Go to the other side. Go, make a 5 or 6 mile run and see if you can find some other fish. Sometimes that whole area is just not on for some reason for the day.
Right. Okay. What do you figure that? And I imagine when you're cleaning these Lakers, you're seeing what they're going after. What do you think they're targeting as far as the bait goes? Is it still a lot of Cisco, or what are you seeing them feeding on?
Yeah, that's all I ever see in lake trout is Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
Early in the spring when they're up shallow, sometimes we'll find crawdads in them, and we have found a few perch in them here and there, but I guess 99% of what's inside those, their stomachs is almost all Cisco.
Yeah. So you just got to kind of emulate what their bait does then and go from there. Now, I talked to Heath Headley here just the podcast before this one, and he was saying that the reason that he felt the salmon were so big this year was because the crop of Cisco was just amazing on Fort Peck. He said they did a Cisco study and just found that it was just huge. And so he said that's why those salmon are getting bigger. And he said it's no coincidence, why we had a state record king and why we had a state record smallie this year too. Is that what you're finding? Because I'm switching here to smallmouth now. Are you finding that these smallies are hitting the Cisco hard, and are you seeing bigger smallmouth than you've seen in the past?
Well, we were just fishing smallmouth the other day, and we were in 25 feet of water, and with the live scope, all of a sudden you could see a big school of Ciscos come through. And all of a sudden, those Ciscos were up on the surface, and you could see the smallmouth kind of busting up on the top there. So we switched from a slip bobber, and we used some kind of floating minnow stick baits and casted them out there to kind of make them look like those Ciscos on the top. And man, those smallmouths were just going nuts. But when we were sitting there was a couple of Ciscos that came by that the smallmouth must have got a hold of and didn't quite get them to eat, and they were just kind of swimming on their side, So yeah, for sure the smallmouth are eating those. I mean, that just kind of seems to be what drives that whole lake, or those
Right.
Ciscos. And I think as far as size of smallmouth, the average size definitely seems to be bigger. One thing I've noticed the past couple of years is it seems the smallmouth are everywhere. It doesn't seem to matter where I go. You can catch those things any darn place in the lake now. And maybe it's always been like that, but to me, it just seems like it's even more prevalent now. We catch them, we've caught them pretty regularly the past few weeks casting spoons for pike just up in the weeds now. So, I mean, they just kind of seem to be all over the place. So,
okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to get into how you're targeting those smallies this time of year, what you're using, and where, if there's any place hotter than the other. So we'll get into all that because the smallmouth on Fort Peck, I think, is yet another one that gets a little bit overlooked. That is just a fantastic fish to catch and a lot of fun. So we'll talk about that right after this. My friends at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer are proud authorized dealers of some of the most highly revered brands in the world, like CM Truck Beds, Diamond C Trailers, and of course, Boss Snowplows. Now, I know some of you may not want to think about this right now, but sorry, we have to face the fact that before we know it, fall will be over and winter will be with us for a long time. Now, last winter, we got off a little easier than in the past years, but this year it will likely be much different. Now, why do I say that? A while back, I did a podcast with Matthew Rosencrans in the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center. He said that his long-term prediction models show that Montana and other areas in the Northwest are in for more precipitation this winter. Could be lots more. Of course, that means snow, and that means driveways, parking lots, and roads will need to be plowed. And of course, that means you'll want a Boss snowplow to get the job done quickly and perfectly every time it snows. And that, my friends, can only mean one thing. You need to talk to Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer right now about a Boss snowplow for your truck, tractor, ATV, or UTV, or whatever you're going to put it on. You need to do this now before they run out of them. You'll be prepared for what is coming because not only will you have the best snowplow in the world that is perfectly designed for what you want to put it on, but the folks at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer will install it for you so it works the first time and every time. Now, this is the time, my friends, to be ready this winter with the best. A Boss snowplow from Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Now, if you're in the area, you can just stop by at 5680 Expressway in Missoula, Montana, or you can just go see them at rmtte.com. rmtte.com. Take a look at all the Boss snowplows they have right now, as well as the other equipment like CM Truck Beds and Diamond C Trailers that will also make your life so much easier this winter. Yeah, there's no better place to get ready for winter than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Go see them now at rmtte.com. That's rmtte.com. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, my guest Don Wilkins is with us, and Don is a great guide. In fact, we're going to get into giving you some info on how you can get out fishing with Don, not only later in this fall as the season allows, but then we're going to get into talking about ice fishing. And Don has had great success ice fishing, and I think is a great teacher for you to learn that sport. It's going to make your winter a lot more fun. Now, back to the smallmouth. So you're saying that we're seeing some bigger smallmouth than that. Do you find, like I was saying before the break, that a lot of times smallmouths get overlooked on Fort Peck? Because a lot of times I see people say, "Oh, no, you don't need to target those." They're a lot of fun to catch, aren't they?
Yeah, they're just getting to be one of my favorite shallow water fish out there. They don't quit. They fight and fight and fight. So a lot of people get in the boat and they haven't fished a lot of smallmouth, and we'll get on a big group of them. And man, I tell you what, it's about as much fun as they have the whole entire time we're out for the day. I think there's probably a fair amount of people that fish them, not as much obviously as like the walleye and maybe the salmon and the Lakers, but I think they're gaining popularity on the lake, but a lot of people out targeting other things, so they do get a little overlooked, I think.
Mm-hmm. So what are you using to get after the smallmouth this time of year? What seems to be your effective go-to for that?
Honestly, right now, slip bobbers and just like a small sucker minnow or a shiner minnow has probably been out fishing the plastics 3 or 4 to 1, and we're just looking for rocky points, not necessarily main lake points, kind of maybe some of the secondary ones back in some of the creek arms where it's usually pretty obvious on Fort Peck where you see the rocks that come down. And, anywhere from 10 to 20 feet of water, although we've noticed since it's started to cool off a little bit, they seem to be moving out a little further. So we've had better success 20 to 30 feet. And man, it's just, and it's just spot locking like we have been doing with the lake trout when you find them and just kind of pitching that slip bobber out there, and a couple other guys with a little jig head, maybe an 1/8 ounce or 3/8 ounce jig head and a plastic, and just kind of fishing both techniques like that. But that slip bobber fishing has been really good lately.
Yeah. And like you're saying, there is no quit in a smallmouth bass. And what I've also found, now I don't know if it changes with this time of year or not, but be ready always with those darn things, because you never know when they're going to hit. And I have seen, one of my favorite stories is the captain and I were fishing for walleye, and we had one of our friends with us, and he had just pulled in a walleye, and he had his other rod. It was just hanging over the side of the boat, and the bait was, just barely in the water hanging there. And the next thing you know, his rod is about to go right overboard. And it was a damn smallie, came right up to the side of the boat. It just amazes me that they have no fear and when they're ready, they just go. Are they as active like that when it comes to these colder weather times and getting into the fall?
It sure seems like they have been, I think once the water temperature gets to a certain point, they start to move out pretty deep. Wintertime, we don't really pick any up with the tip-ups or anything. I think all last year we maybe caught one. But right now when, the water temps are dropping and they know winter's coming, they are pretty aggressive when you find them, for sure.
Yeah, they're saying we better get our feet on before it's too late, I guess, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think, folks, just take my advice on this one. Give the smallies a little more respect and give them a try, because I think you're going to have a lot of fun with them. Now, before we get into preparing for ice fishing and that, is there anything else that you have been targeting or any surprises you've had so far in this fall fishing season out on Fort Peck that you want to share with us?
Probably the two biggest surprises, we caught a 39-inch and a 42-inch northern out, jigging Lakers in 45 to 55 feet of water. So, it wasn't expected, but probably shouldn't be too unexpected when you think about how those fish, everything out there kind of follows around wherever those Cisco were at. But definitely was a surprise when we pulled those two fish up, and seen them pop up next to the boat. That's a couple of the bigger ones we've caught this year. And then we were also fishing back in just west in Sage Creek. I think this last week, and we were casting spoons for pike, and the client cast it over where he saw a little swirl in the water. And I'll be gosh darned if it wasn't a salmon that would have been one of the ones that was going to spawn this year, really dark colored. But as soon as he hooked, knew it wasn't, a pike or something. It kind of took off screaming out behind the boat and jumped a couple times and come unhooked. But very surprised to see that down there.
Yeah, that's really unusual for this time of year.
Well, and you're starting to hear a lot more people seeing some of these late season salmon, back in, sounds like some people seen some back in Bear Creek, down in Rock Creek, down by Fourchette and that. So they're probably more widespread than a guy thinks,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I did that podcast here just last time with Heath, he was talking about how, one, he was talking about the selection and why they plant them where they plant them, which was interesting. But he also said, that the thought is that they will come back to where they were put in, but that's not necessarily the case. That he feels they somehow get kind of imprinted on where the hatchery is, and they want to go to where they were actually born. And
Right.
so that happens, but he said there is a decent number of them that get a little confused, and they get off in some of these areas that, like you were saying, that you just wouldn't normally think they were there, that, somehow, and, it's still kind of a mystery to us as to why they do what they do. They're getting a better idea, but still not sure. So we don't know the whole story there, but from what it sounds like, some of these salmon get kind of off, lost a little bit, and so you're going to find them, whether you're targeting them or not. So let's move on to ice fishing a bit. As far as this year goes, I don't know if folks that have been listening to this podcast remember, but I think it was like last January, I had he's like the top weather predictor for the National Weather Service. And he was talking about how they do their weather predictions and how they do these long-term weather predictions. And we were talking about, all of Montana, but also talking Fort Peck and other areas. And he was saying that from what they are looking at, that we are going to see more of a normal winter this year, that we're going to see more snow as this overall system kind of switches from El Nino to La Nina, which means more moisture and all that. And so it looks like, and I'm going to try to get him on again here soon and just see if he's got any updates for us. But from the sounds of things, it sounds like we might have more of a usual winter and a longer winter. So if you haven't ice fished before, you might want to take that up. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting indoors twiddling your thumbs for a long time. Are you already booking trips now, Don, for guiding for ice fishing?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That area is looking fairly full, and the first half of March is dang near full. So yeah, definitely getting trips and getting ready. And that's kind of what I've been working on the days off in between here the past few days, is getting all the vehicles ready and rods and tip ups and electronics and everything, so that when we're ready to go, we're ready to go. Yeah.
And this is where I really want to stress, and I'm not just tooting your horn, but if you're going to try ice fishing for the first time, or maybe you haven't done it in a long time, I really can't stress enough the idea of hiring a guide like Don to take you out. Because one, from a safety standpoint, you're going to learn a lot of things about how to do this right so you don't have any problems. And two, so you have a good success rate, you really need to learn a lot about where to go, how to go, and all that. And that's something that I think people forget about a guide, is you don't mind teaching, do you?
Nope, definitely not. We have a lot of like we call tag along trips that we do, where I actually have some clients, and then I'll have people that message me and have never been out here before, wondering places to go, where the safe trails and stuff are. And they'll just hire me for a few hours, and they just kind of follow us out where we are going fishing, and I'll stop and show them some places where we've done well, what we've been using, and the trails to get in and out of there. So no, I don't have any issue with that.
Well, and I can't stress enough to do that, because I think, one, you're going to have a much more productive ice fishing season, and a lot safer one. So let's talk a bit about getting the gear ready, since that's what you've been in the middle of doing right now. Take us through what you check, what you look for, and all that to get ready for ice fishing. Because when It always seems like all of a sudden it's there.
Yeah,
We're waiting and waiting, and then boom, it's time for ice fishing. Talk about what you do to get ready.
sure. So, one of the first things I kind of go through, and one thing you can do to help yourself out too when you're getting ready for the next year, if you take a little bit of time at the end of the ice fishing season the prior year and fix up, a few of the things, definitely saves you some time. But tip ups, the first thing I do is go through those and I check all of my swivels and make sure my leaders are, there's no nicks in them. The hooks are all good. That my line, the braided line isn't frayed. Everything's working the way it should. And then I kind of move on to the rods, leaders, make sure my braided line all looks good. I don't have any dings on any of the rods, the eyes or anything like that. And then I just kind of start moving on to the, my electronics, and mostly that's going to be batteries, and I get everything plugged in and fired up and make sure everything's working the way it should. I'm actually working on putting together another live scope for this year.
Oh.
And after that, I'm onto the vehicles, and I just replaced one of the batteries in one of the side-by-sides and fixed a few of the work lights and stuff on it like that. But go through the safety gear, make sure I have all the ice picks, the throw bags, everything like that. And if you're like me, I have to have a list. So
Yeah.
I just checklist and then I go through things like that, because if I just try to remember it off the top of my head, I'll always forget something. So
Well, I want to take one more quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about the types of gear that you prefer or might be able to suggest. That's probably one of the questions I get the most from folks that listen to this podcast on a regular basis and will email me and say, hey, you had this guest on or that guest. What do they use? So let's talk a bit about from tip ups to, the other gear that you use, if there's any brands that you like. So we'll talk about that right after this. Hey, I want to tell you a bit about one of the great businesses that is responsible for making this podcast possible. I'm talking about my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. They're a well-established Montana company with origins starting way back to 1977. They've been proudly serving the Missoula community and, well, far beyond that since then. Yeah, so no matter where you're listening, they can help you. Now, again, if you have been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that some of the things Superior Hardwoods is most known for are their extraordinary flooring lines. In fact, a majority of those are manufactured right there in their lumber yard in Missoula. And speaking of flooring, they just introduced the Timeless Pre-Finish series. Now, this is a series designed to simplify the overwhelming task of remodeling and replacing the old worn-out flooring in your home. This new series allows you to effortlessly transform any room pretty much instantly. This flooring is made in America and comes in pre-finished maple, hickory, white oak, red oak, ash, and reclaimed oak. It's just beautiful. It has a superior quality sealer and matte finish to it. Now, this totals 6 coats of durable protection on the floor. But along with all their different flooring lines and their acres of reclaimed beams and lumber, they also offer fantastic products to complete your remodel. Thousands of feet of alder molding and hundreds of square feet of stunning antique paneling. Just beautiful stuff. That's going to make your home feel special to you and your family and friends every time they come see you. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, but when you work with the folks at Superior Hardwoods of Montana, you'll be able to create a look for your home that says who you really are to all who stop by. I guess what I'm trying to say is it completes your remodel project to the point that your house just doesn't have a new look or updated look to it. No, it becomes much more than that. Not just a house you live in, but it is now uniquely your home. And it'll feel that way, not just because the project is completed. No, it will feel that way every time you and your family and friends walk through the door. That, my friends, is the difference that Superior Hardwoods of Montana makes. Stop by their showroom in Missoula, Montana today if you can, or give them a call at 406-251-2272, or just visit their website. It's a great way to get to know them at superior-hardwoods.com. That's superior-hardwoods.com, and let them guide you through the woods. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, Don Wilkins has joined me. We're getting ready for ice fishing. Yeah, I know. You say, hey, come on, Downrigger, don't rush it too quick here. We got to hunt. We got to do a few other things. But now's the time to get ready where you have the time. Often, you're starting to see stores get into stock. If there's something special you want, now's the time to get it ordered. Go to your favorite sporting goods store and have them get it ordered for you, so everything's in for you by the time it's time to get out on the ice. So let's start with tip-ups, Don. Is there a particular brand, a particular type of tip-up that you like better than others?
I like the HT Enterprises, the Predator tip-up that they make. It's got an oversized spool on it, and on the bottom of the spools, it has a single pin for winding the line up, which is really nice if you have a glove on. Some of them have two pins, and when you're trying to spin that around, sometimes that second pin wants to get tangled up in your glove. So single pin, big bright flag on them. The base on them is good and sturdy, and I'm just about have everything replaced to where that's all I have is the HT Predator tip-ups.
They seem to be the most reliable that you've used, huh?
Yeah, easy to use, easy to wind in, and that's the thing when it's cold. You got gloves on and everything. You don't want to have something that's, easy to use when you got all those big bulky items on. And that seems to be the best for me, to be honest with you.
Okay. And all the things that go along with that tip up, talk about those and what you're putting on and some of the preferred things that you use there.
Sure. I'll run anywhere from an 80 to 100 pound section of braid. And then to that, a barrel swivel. And what I've been using is a tieable titanium wire that American Fishing Wire makes. Terminator used to make a brand of it too, 30 pound, and you can clip it off and you can tie whatever length of leader you want yourself. The stuff is super thin. It doesn't bother the walleye, and it's titanium, so you can catch, you're going to go through several northerns out there with tip-ups, and it doesn't kink up. You don't have to replace it much. And then I'll run like a number 8 or a number 10 treble hook on there, and we're usually fishing, fathead minnows or shiner minnows or suckers or something like that. In Fort Peck, we can leave our tip-ups out overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to do that, I encourage you to invest in some hole covers. Thermoset makes some nice foam ones, and that just helps keep the hole from freezing up as much as it would if you just left the open hole with the tip up in there. Sometimes it gets cold enough at night, you could see that thing freeze all the way to the spool overnight, and then you really have a mess trying to chip that out in the morning.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, if that happens, how do you go about doing that without just screwing up everything?
Well, I hate to say it, but I've seen it before where, once it gets like that, you use an ice bar, and it's a lot of work. You use your spud bar, and it's a lot of work to get it out. If it's froze all the way to the spool, you're darn lucky to get it out if you don't break your tip up or damage the spool or break the frame or something like that. So hole covers are a big thing. And if there's snow, just take the time and shovel a little bit of snow over top of that hole cover, and you'd be amazed. We've had days where it's been 10 or 15 below out overnight, a hole cover and a little bit of snow, and there's just a tiny little skip of ice over that thing in the morning. So
that's great advice. Great advice. Because I think that is probably one area that people forget a lot. And like you say, you may have a favorite tip up that is not your favorite anymore by the time you get done with it.
Yeah.
All right. As far as ice augers go, what do you use? Is there any particular one that you recommend over others?
So I got a Ion Alpha last year. And, I kind of resisted going with the electric just because Fort Peck gets a lot of dirt and sand on the ice, and you can go through some blades pretty quick. And one thing about a propane or a gas one, if blades are dull, you can still lean on it and keep going and keep going. But man, I got to say, I was super impressed with that thing, and I have had zero issues. They come with 2 batteries if you get the plus, and man, you cut a ton of holes out there ice fishing on Fort Peck, whether you're moving tip ups or we're chasing Lakers around. Honestly, it's not out of line to cut 50, 60 holes in a day. And I have had zero issue running out of battery with that thing. So
really, that many holes?
Yeah. And honestly, probably more than that. And I'm just being honest. And sometimes when you go out there, you cut, if you got 3 or 4 people and you're just jumping around trying to find Lakers, you will cut a lot of holes in a day if you're really on the hunt. And then if you decide you want to move tip ups, there's maybe 25 holes right there, moving everybody's tip ups all over. So 50 holes in a day, not out of line. And I've never ran out of battery with that thing. So if you're looking to look at an electric auger, that Ion Alpha is amazing how fast that thing cuts, and it doesn't weigh anything.
Wow, now that's a new one for me. That's interesting.
And it's 10-inch hole too, I might add. That's not an 8-inch. That's cutting 50 10-inch holes in a day.
10-inch holes.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Now, do you is it mostly tip ups that you're doing, or do you do any of the shelters where you're sitting inside and jigging or doing any of that stuff?
Yeah, we'll typically run out and we'll go through tip ups first thing in the morning. You can leave them out overnight. So we'll go run through those first and see what we have. And then depending on the weather, we'll go out and we'll get in the ice houses and we'll jig for lake trout, fish Lakers the rest of the day. If it's nice out, we'll run around and fish outside or whatever. And then go back through and run through the tip ups again on the way back to shore.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of an ice house do you use?
I have 3 of the black hole ice houses, they call them. They have 4 ice fishing holes in the corners, and then in the center, there's a door you can pull out if you want to try your hand at some spearing. So put a big buddy heater in there. 2 people can sit in there and fish, and I'm really comfortable. Gets really nice and warm in there. Put one of the live scopes in the center, and everybody can see their jig right there on the screen in front of them. So they're really nice and they're really mobile. I just move them around with my side-by-sides. So
those are the kind they just collapse all down in kind of like a tent type thing, or what?
No, they're on a tray. They have a hard floor in them.
Okay.
And they're on they have a single axle in them. And then whenever you get to where you actually want to fish, you just drop them down like you do some of the hard-sided ones you see.
Uh-huh.
And fish out of them that way. So yeah, no, they have a good solid floor in them. They get really nice and warm in there and pretty comfortable.
Do they handle the wind pretty good? Because that does happen. I've been told it does happen every now and then on Fort Peck.
Well, I put them out there, when we started the end of January last year, and I didn't pull them off until the 10th of March. And there were some days, I think the wind blew 50, 60 miles an hour out there, and we had zero issues. So yeah, they stand up a lot better than the ones you put the screws in the ice. That's for darn sure.
Wow. Okay. How about electronics? Talk a bit about the electronics you're using for ice fishing.
So we're using the Garmin live scopes with the LVS, the 62 transducer. That bigger transducer helps you read down in some of the deeper water where we're finding lake trout. I also have some Humminbird helixes. They're 9-inch screens, and we'll use them kind of jumping around. If we find a bunch of them, they're just kind of handy to just grab by the handle and just go from hole to hole to hole. Sometimes you get people on a hole hop around, and that's primarily it. The Garmin live scopes and the Humminbird helixes.
Okay. All right. Now, here's the other big ask that your old buddy Downrigger is going to ask you. Can you send me a list of all we talked about so I could put that down in the podcast description so folks can be able to refer back to it and see just what you use as far as your suggestions?
Absolutely.
There we go. So now, folks, go down, look at your podcast description, and I'll either have it listed or I'll have a link to it, and I'll set it up where you can look at that, because this is just great information. And lastly, before I let you go, Don, for the clothing side of it, if you have the right clothing, a long day of ice fishing is fantastic. If you don't have the right clothing, it's miserable. What do you recommend for fishing out and spending a good day outside on Fort Peck with sub-zero weather?
So, it's kind of like anything. I'm out there all the time, so you get kind of acclimated to it. So, but I will say, last year I bought a pair of Striker ice bibs, which I've used some of those for a while, but it's the Climate. I don't know if you call it model, but that's what it's called, the Striker Climate bibs. And I can honestly say there's days where if it's, above zero and you're kind of cutting holes, putting tip ups in, you almost have to take the coat off. But they're just that warm. So those Climate Striker bibs, that's about as good as they get. And they float. So, God forbid bad happens. Most of the fishing bibs you get anymore have the flotation capabilities to them. As far as gloves go, I've been using those Hot Fingers gloves for several years now, and man, they're tough to beat. So,
all right. Well, you've given us a lot of stuff to think about, and we'll have a good shopping list for people to get out there and start getting stuff ordered up and ready to go for ice fishing. And you've given us great information about continuing on and enjoying some great fall fishing. Lastly, how do we get in touch with you? If somebody wants to get on and book we'll start with ice fishing, since that's what we were just talking about. If somebody wants to book a trip for ice fishing, how do they go about doing that with you?
Well, there's several different ways. You can get on Fort Peck Fishing with Trevor's guide service, his webpage, and you'll find my information on there. Big Sky Fishing Charters, Get the Net Outfitters. You can look me up on Facebook. On my Facebook page, it's 56 Fishing Guide Service, and you can message me, or my phone number's on there, or email me, and you can call up to the Lake Ridge Lodging and Bait Shop, and they'll get a hold of me, and we can get hooked up that way too.
So on your podcast description, folks, I'll have links to all that he just said, so that you'll be able to get to that. Now, it sounds like you're already booking trips. So if people want to, get out on Fort Peck and have you take them out for a great day of ice fishing, this would be something they should probably get on right now, because you're probably going to fill up. You usually do, don't you?
Yeah. There's a handful of days in February and a few days in March left, and every time as soon as it starts getting cold, the phone really starts ringing. So.
Yeah, so now would be the time. Just get it booked and get it ready to go. Now, what happens if, let's say they book a trip and we have some kind of weird weather where it's just not safe to get out? How does that work?
Well, we just have to, cancel and try to reschedule, because like you just said, the big word there, safe. And that's the thing with ice fishing. There's things in the boat we have a little more control over. If the wind is blowing, we see that coming, we don't go. If there's a storm, we can get in a bay and get out of the way. Ice fishing, man, I'll tell you what, I probably check the ice more than any single person out on that lake, I would guess. And safety is the big thing. And if you're out there and you feel a little bit nervous, like I'm not sure, it's not worth it. Just don't go. So safety, big thing out there with ice fishing.
Well, and that's the way to do it. It's better than the way that the captain does it with me. He takes one of those T-shirt cannons, puts $100 bill, and shoots it out on the ice, and then has me go look for it. And yeah, I don't recommend it, folks. I mean, the $100 just isn't worth it. But he seems to get a kick out of it. So anyway, well, you've given us just so much great information, Don. I really do appreciate it. And folks, we're going to have Don come back as we get into the season, and we'll go through a whole safety thing and that, and then we'll get into actually targeting species and all that stuff too. So we'll get Don back on here. But for now, you've given us a lot to chew over and a lot to think about for fall fishing and getting ready for ice fishing. I do appreciate it, Brother Wilkins, and we'll have all your contact info down there so folks can get on and get a trip booked with you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I truly do.
All right. Don Wilkins, everybody, that guy is, I would say, one of the top guides that you're going to find for not just fall fishing and ice fishing, but all summer long and getting after those salmon too. So we'll have lots more talk with him about. Plus, I've got all kinds more of podcasts coming up. We're going to do another quick check into the hunting season, see how things are going in different areas there too and all that. So don't go anywhere. Just keep checking back here. We'll see you next time on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.